What is the craziest, scariest thing you've ever experienced as an anthropologist? My name is Ben Collins, and I am a term assistant professor in anthropology here. I'm also an archaeologist. That's kind of what I do. Well, I guess there's a couple of different ways to think about this. I guess getting reviews back on a paper. So reviewer number 2 was real, and they're awful. And I actually had one last year where the person slandered me personally, which was super awesome, which was great. So that's one of the craziest things. In terms of like fieldwork stuff, many years ago, when I was working in Namaqualand, which is in the northwest part of South Africa, they have the site is in the Richtersveld Desert, so it's a desert dry site, and it's home to the Namaqualand spitting cobra, and they're a lovely snake, but they're also like a spitting cobra. And one of the students saw a spitting cobra kind of slowly making its way down the road, and it got scared and it dived underneath an acacia tree, and they have kind of huge big points, or like, you know, big prickles, I guess. That was right next to my tent, so there was no way for us to like go in there and get it out. And it meant that that night my neighbor was a Namaqualand spitting cobra, and it was super cold that night, and snakes like to sleep next to warm things. So that was one of the worst, the most kind of, and for nothing. Like the snake just kind of went away, but it was a fun time. How is anthropology important in our daily lives? Why should people care about anthropology? So that's a great question. I think from an archaeology perspective, people are interested in the past and in knowing about the past. And I'm a big believer in the past being something that people should have access to. So I think it's incumbent on archaeologists to make the past accessible to people, to the public, to make it interesting and engaging, etc. Because fundamentally, most of the research and everything that gets done is funded through government tax dollars. So it's really, people should be able to see it. Broader anthropology, I think it helps us to be more reflexive about how we go about our daily lives and what our daily lives look like, especially in terms of understanding how the world around us, the institutions, the systems, the different, why we do the things we do, and especially looking at how those things may or may not be supporting kind of broader culture, society, etc. What research am I currently doing? So currently I'm not doing very much because it's the middle of the semester, which means I'm doing a lot more grading and teaching, but I have 2 kind of research projects that I'm working on. So one is in South Africa, and it's the Grassridge Archaeology and Paleo-Environmental Project. And so for that project, myself and my collaborators are working at a site called Grassridge, which is in the interior grasslands in kind of the middle of Southern Africa. And we're really interested in how past foraging peoples were living in that particular environment, because it's understudied, and from about 100,000 years ago all the way up to the last couple of thousand years. And we're really interested in how they were interacting, or looking at interaction spheres and social networks and connections, kind of not just in the local region, but also extending out to the coast, which is about 200 kilometers away, up into the Drakensberg Mountains, which is 50, 100 kilometers away, and to other parts of the interior. And looking at how people changed and adapted and thrived in those landscapes, as those landscapes changed through major glacial and interglacial cycles. So that's pretty cool. Really enjoy doing that. And then the other component is working here in Manitoba. So working with with collaborators Brandy Cable and Colin Wren in Kent, who's also in the department. Taking radiocarbon dates from the Canadian Archaeology Radiocarbon Database, or CARD, and just mapping them across Manitoba and through time. because no one had done that before, and that gives us some information looking at, I guess, kind of potentially where and the density of how indigenous peoples were living in the province. And really interestingly, it points to biases in where research and archaeology are being done in the province. And then the second component of that is working with Kayla Shaganash, Laura Kelvin, who's in the department, and then Camilla Speller at UBC, to look at fauna from the collection just down the hole there, and see if the fauna can be analyzed using zooarchaeology by mass spectrometry, or ZooMS, and ancient DNA. And so this provides us with kind of information on what species those bone fragments belong to, what animal species, and it helps us to better understand past kind of human and animal interactions, and it also helps us to better understand the environment. And that's also the first time that this has been done, to our knowledge, in Manitoba. So if it works out, if we get good results, then it's something that we can look at expanding in the future. How does your research impact people? And that's a great question. So I guess both projects impact people in terms of both projects have a strong focus on student involvement, student collaboration, and making sure to provide opportunities and experience and mentorship and support for students as they're learning about archaeology and as they're moving through undergraduate and graduate programs. Where also, especially with our South African research, really, we have a lot of collaborators, and we really think it's important to have a lot of South African collaborators and just be really conscious of that kind of context in South Africa, and that kind of global north bias and nature of extractive research that has happened there and continues to happen there. Again, for both projects, one of the things that we think is super important is finding ways to make our findings engaging and accessible to people in the public, so people in local communities, as well as kind of the broader public. And so looking at multilingual forms of knowledge mobilization, starting to look at different kinds of social media engagement, and things like that. So those are I guess some of the ways the research impacts people. What is my favorite movie and why? And that's a great question. I don't really think I have one favorite movie. I guess that's not one that I really answer at the moment. I kind of I do like Stanley Kubrick as a director. So 2001: A Space Odyssey, that whole first part with Australopithecines, and thinking of the context of when it was written and filmed in the 60s and everything, is kind of interesting, even though it has those kind of ancient alien pseudo-archaeology connections. Cats or dogs? We had 2 pugs growing up, so kind of dogs, although my partner is a big cat person, and we cat sat for about 10 days over the summer there. So I think I can be swayed. As long as they're cuddly, then it's fine with me. What is my favorite discovery, either mine or someone else's? I think for me it's we found some silicified plant remains at Gross Ridge in 2016, and that's not something I'd ever recovered before, and they're about 40,000 years old. And it looks like it was one event where somebody was collecting some sedges from up top or around the shelter and brought them in and stored them next to a hearth for as a source for fuel. So I think for me that's pretty cool, because it's it's like a potentially 10 minutes of behavior that's captured in the archaeological record, and there's 40,000 years later here we are talking about it, which is interesting. So it's something super mundane, but super cool. What is my favorite class to teach? I kind of like all the classes that I teach. I think my favorite, and this isn't a course I've taught here at Manitoba, but it's a course that I've taught at the University of Winnipeg as a sessional, was I think Origins of Modern Human Behavior. And so I think that's a fun course to teach because I don't think there is one thing that defines modern human behavior. And it was a third, fourth year reading course, so it allowed us to really get into not just what people were writing, but how, like, the context and background into which, like, this debate over modern human behavior became such a big thing, and why it's such a non-starter or non-entity. Okay, if I could go back in time, what period or culture would you love to live among? That's a great question. I think I'm pretty content with where I am now. Flush toilets are great. I like my mattress for my bed because I'm getting older. It's I don't think there's one particular thing I would switch for. Do you often get compared to Indiana Jones? For me, not so much. Every now and then it happens, but I like to try and dissociate myself from that stereotype pretty quick. I don't wear a leather jacket, I don't have a hat or a whip or anything. And that's something that, I think in all the courses I teach, especially the archaeology ones, we try and kind of dispel that Indiana Jones stereotype or trope pretty quick. The movies are pretty interesting though. I mean, I grew up with the movies, so that was always kind of fun to watch. Any final comments or thoughts? No, I'm just really looking forward to seeing what the other faculty members talk about and how they answer the questions. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm also really excited to get to know students better. And thanks so much for your time.